Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members and guests. It's December the 1st, 2025, and this is a regular meeting of the West Shore Photography Club. I'm Dennis Baker, the president of the club and your host for this evening. We have a very special presentation for you this evening, but before that, a few items of business to take care of. I am pleased to announce that we currently have 105 paid members. So thank you to everybody who renewed your membership. We're just down a little bit yet from last year. In May, we ended that year with 130. So we're still looking for new members and maybe even a couple folks who haven't yet renewed from last year. As you know, the exhibit at the Mechanicsburg Art Center has ended, and it's time for picking up our prints. So tomorrow was designated as the first day, and yes, I know it's supposed to snow, but if you're able to get over tomorrow, you can pick up your prints between 11 a.m. and 7 p.m. If that doesn't work, Wednesday between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. Now, because of the forecast for tomorrow, I've asked the folks over there, Tina and Bill, if they could possibly extend the pickup through Thursday. Haven't gotten a word on that yet, so I'll get that to you via email as soon as I find out. Okay. The next regular meeting will be in 2 weeks on Monday, December the 15th. It will be an image review. There's no theme, so you can enter whatever you want. And of course, what we suggest is this is not a competition. It's an image review. We're not looking for your best work. Some people will do that. They'll submit something because they think this is the best I can do. I want everybody to see my best work. And that's fine. But some brave people will say, here's a photo I've been working on for a while, and I'm just not sure if I'm getting it right. And they'll present that to get another opinion. And of course, you have the opinion of the reviewer, who's going to be Bryson Leidig, and you also have the opinion of the members who are participating who can chime in. So feel free to enter, especially the newer folks who may not have submitted. Bryson is very good about reviewing images. He's very kind and understanding. He will analyze your image thoroughly and give you some good positive feedback. So we'll open that. Hopefully, within the next few days, you'll be able to upload your images, one image, to the website, and I'll give you all the details in the follow-up email tomorrow morning. But that's the next meeting, December the 15th. Image review, no theme. Please consider entering a photo. Okay, let's turn it over to Jean. She's going to tell us about trips.
Yes, thanks, Dennis. On Saturday, the 13th of this month, we're going to be going to Children's Lake once again. However, we're going at 4 o'clock, hoping to get there for the blue hour to do the luminaries and the trees, the decorated Christmas trees. I believe we're meeting at the clock tower, and we'll go from there. So 4 o'clock. I just confirmed about 3 hours ago that on January 27th, which is a Tuesday, from 10 a.m. to noon, we are invited back to the State Library. We had gone last year and it was well received, and they are tickled pink to have us back. So we will be going there in January. We're meeting in January, the trips committee, to get some trips scheduled for next year. So look for that at the end of January then. Thanks, Dennis.
Okay, very good, Jean. Thank you. Anyone have anything for the good of the order at this point before we get on to our presenter? Okay, very good. This evening, we have Nathan St. Andre with us from Utah, and his presentation is entitled Revisit, 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 How and Why Visiting Locations Can Make You a Better Photographer. So rather than me read his bio, Nathan is going to tell you a little bit about himself and then get right into the presentation. So Nathan, thank you for joining us. It's all yours.
Okay, deal. Let me start with sharing my PowerPoint. Okay, let's see how this is looking. And
Yes, we can
okay,
see.
how does that look?
Yes, we can see it
Okay, good.
in full screen.
Okay, good. Awesome. So, hey everyone, I'm your speaker today, Nathan St. Andre. I am coming out from Utah to come chit chat with you this evening. Uh, Things are looking lovely here right now. We have decent weather. It's not blazing hot, and temperatures finally dropped, so they're relatively pleasant, but they're not miserable. So, we sit in the comfortable land. And like he was saying, my topic is this idea of revisit, 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 and why I am a huge proponent of this. And every once in a while, I hear photographers who refuse to do this. So I want to talk about why it matters. So, about me, let me introduce myself officially. So I'm a photographer here in Utah. My background's actually in biology. And so I've worked for both state and federal agencies working with fish and amphibians and reptiles and birds across southern Utah. And so I've had a chance to walk and wander around the rivers all throughout the desert here to go catch little fish. And then I earned my master's, which is this middle picture here, working at BYU University. Um, sorry. I picked up a master's working on the fish in Lake Powell. And so I spent 2 years thinking about that lake and all the cool things that are about it. And then I am also married with 4 kids. So you can see my wife over here with all my little scallywags I have running around. And we went as dragons for Halloween this year. I felt like a fun image to kick this thing off. But for me as a photographer, I've been photographing the Southwest for about 11 years, maybe 12. I've been actively selling my photos for about 8 years. And so at this point, I'm pretty sure I have photos in every state and on all the continents except for Antarctica. One of the advantages of being here in southern Utah, the world comes to me and then they buy my stuff and then leave. And so with that, I kind of have this interesting reality that I have photos around the world. So that's kind of cool. I've been featured on SStop Collaborate and Listen, so if you know that podcast, and a few other places as well. And currently, I teach at Utah Tech University as a college professor. So I teach an introduction to photography, a digital photo editing course, and then a landscape and nature photography course because we live here in southern Utah. And I also teach biology classes. And I'm a part of what's called the Nature Photography Collective, which is this little organization right here, which is how you guys got a hold of me. I am their workshop lead, so I'm the guy who plans all of the workshops and organizes it, and or at least all the Southwest ones. There are other ones that happen, and so I plan all the South and Western photography workshops here around the state of Utah, particularly if it comes to like overlanding and driving around out in the middle of nowhere. So at the very end, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But let's get into the meat of this topic, this idea of revisiting locations. And so I came up with this philosophy after I listened to an interview from a photographer, and I don't even remember his name anymore. And his philosophy was he never went back to the same place again. He would go to one area and he would photograph it, and then he would leave. And he's like, I don't see any reason to go back. Um, and that is not how I function at all. And so when I was thinking about this and kind of coming up with this presentation for you guys, I came up with two different ideas about revisiting. One is location and the other one's files. And so location is simply like places we go and places we visit. And then files, I think about future planning and how we can do things now as a photographer to prepare ourselves for the day when we can come back to those photos so that we can then do a better job. So let's get into this. Let me break this down into kind of like three different ways and ideas about revisiting. Um, so the first one that we talk about is places we visit is like local locations. Then places I want to talk about revisiting are farther away locations that we only go to a couple times a year. And then finally, how we apply my philosophies about revisiting to places that we'll only go to once in our lifetime. Because we'll go to a handful of these of locations that we will never get a chance to go to ever again. And so So let's talk about our local haunts. Who here has a local haunt that they like going to in particular? you can shout them out.
Oh, I have a lake nearby, Lake Pinchot. That's a great place to go. I kayak there and photograph.
Wildflowers every spring at the Pine Hill Arboretum.
Ah,
And again, we're going to Children's Lake. We've gone there a couple times throughout the year. Plus, I photograph sessions there multiple times a year as well.
okay, good. So we hopefully everyone has a local haunt that they like going to. If you don't, I highly suggest you choosing one now. And so when I think about local haunts, these are places that are nearby, half an hour, 45 minutes away, maybe an hour max. Um, when I think about local haunts, these places are low cost to get to, price, time, and safety. That's kind of how I break it down. There are places that are easy to get to that are dangerous. There are places that are easy to get to, but they're super expensive. And then there's places that are fairly easy to get to, but it takes too much time. So like these are the things that I kind of look for this criteria of local haunts. And the advantage and why we bother to pay attention to these local haunts, because they're a place to work on skills, right? These are places that you can put a lot of time and energy and effort into that don't require you to travel for 4 days or 2 days or even a full day. You can do this in a quick afternoon. And so these are places to work on technical skills. This is why you talked about that lake, a place where you can sit there and practice, locations where you can practice tracking weather, which is actually a really important one because I'm a landscape photographer. I don't know how many of you guys are landscape photographers, but for me, being able to go to a place and then see what the weather is before I go out there and see it, and then go back and then train my brain and train my understanding of how the weather works in a region to some place that has a low cost, right? I know what the weather will be like in Zion on any given day because I've done this so much now, for example. And then these are also places where we can practice creativity that doesn't risk, ruining once in a lifetime shots. And so these are my local haunts. And so for me, my two local haunts are like Beaver Dam Wash, which is this image over here in the bottom left with the Joshua trees, and then Zion National Park is my other local haunt. And so the Joshua trees is about 50 minutes from me. Zion's about 45, and each provide very different opportunities. The Joshua trees, for example, have no iconic images. Everything there you have to figure out when you go out there. There is essentially me and like two other photographers in the local community who even bother to go there. While Zion, on the other hand, has really kind of well established iconic shots, but it has a lot of things that are very different. And so these are my two local haunts that I do all of my practicing photography in on a regular basis because they're really easy to get to. So the local haunts, the yes and philosophy. So let me introduce you to this idea of the yes and. There was a great commercial that came out a few years ago, and I think it may have been a Coca-Cola commercial, where it was a gentleman, it was like a Super Bowl commercial, and the gentleman got hired for a job, and the guy was like, "Would you like the job?" And he said yes, and then he would say, and then the guy would get a raise or get something. And so every single time he would go to any situation, he would always do a yes and. And so when I think about this yes and philosophy, it is this idea where you go to a place, go to some place and add to it. And so when we think about this yes and philosophy in places that we have local, think about what you've done in those areas. Have you done wide angle photography, telephoto photography, macro, and nature and landscape photography? Or have you only done just one? Can you think of what type of images you have or haven't done? Now, and other things you need to also do at your local haunts. Where have you visited in your local area and where have you not visited? And try to knock off as many of those areas you haven't visited. Because the idea is with these local areas is that you can build this large repertoire and reservoir of knowledge in a single area to the point where when whatever is going on, you can go there and find something that meets your need. You get to the point where you really, really know the area like the back of your hand. And so you ask yourself, what have you seen and what have you not seen? And then ask yourself as you go to these local areas, have you been there in all 4 seasons? Uh, that's one of those things. A lot of times photographers will come out here to the Southwest here in Utah, and they'll come out in October and only see it in the fall, and then they leave. And so they only see it for one season. And then as you start building out this yes and idea, have I seen it in stormy weather, misty weather, sunny weather, sunrise, sunset, partly cloudy, snow, and you sit here and you keep hitting the same area over and over and over again until you've functionally crossed off every type of idea or philosophy that can be found within that area. And so that local haunt allows you to practice essentially all of your skills in every type of weather, in every type of condition, at night, at day, in hard conditions and easy conditions. And if you do that, it builds up the muscles for you to be able to go anywhere else and do a better job. So here's my yes and repeat. So the local haunts, yes and repeat. So yes and repeat philosophy. Yes, there are places you have visited already, but could get better shots. Does anybody have a place like that in their mind right now? Or pull up the chat and you can throw it in chat. Does anybody have any place that they go to right now regularly and have photos from there, but have ideas that you could do better? Got one. What would it be if for whoever has a yes, throw out, kind of describe the idea of the image that you have in mind and what you wanted to do or what you'd like to do. I have a Michael, a nature reserve by his house. What image do you have there that you have in mind that you've wanted to redo and do better?
There's a certain tree that I visit every time I go there.
Well, what about that tree makes it so you want to keep going back to it?
All the changes that happen over the course of a year, that
Hmm.
it's unrecognizable from, say, fall into winter. You can't tell it's even the same tree, and then so on. So it gives practice in a lot of different things because it changes monthly, really.
Yeah, that's always really nice places that are like that. So I have a couple areas. I have a couple shots that I have in Zion that I'm always trying to do where I get like the shot. And so one of them was a rainbow over these particular cliffs that I tried for 10 years to get. And so it was one of those my yes place that I kept going back to over and over again. Okay. Then when we have our yes and philosophy, we move on to the way of the and areas in your local haunt that you haven't been to yet that have potential. I have a handful of locations that I have in mind that I just haven't gone to yet, but I know about. And then the idea is repeat. Every time you go to your local haunt, you go to the place you know and then expand just a little bit farther to the place you don't know to try to find and fill out this idea and this philosophy. So this is our yes and repeat philosophy that I'm going to use for the rest of the night and start talking about as we go through this. Did it freeze? Okay, here we go. So let's see this in action, Beaver Dam Wash, my yes and philosophy and how I use it here. So Beaver Dam Wash, like I said, is this cool area. It's a grove of Joshua trees near my home. And it's something that I have visited a lot over the years. But when I first went out there, it was in 2019, and I just went out on a hunch to see if it worked. And I kind of knew about it, but I didn't know what it would do. And so this is my very first image I have recorded out in that area. And I took this photo and then I went on my merry way, and conditions weren't bad. But then I decided over the years I was going to come back and revisit this. And so I didn't get a chance to actually go back here until 2021. And once I went back in 2021, I revisited it at night because it's something I hadn't done. And so this is my and. I went there first, my yes, and I went out there again, but this time I caught it at night to get to see the Milky Way. But I learned a lesson that this area is kind of awful for light pollution. And so this is looking out, and that big bright area, that's light coming off from my local city. that is St. George. And then if I turned the other direction, I would have the light from Las Vegas that would kill the image from that direction. And so I learned in the process of doing this that going out and doing night images wasn't really worth my time. But there was still lots of good potential out there. And so every single time I'd go back out there, I would begin to track weather to get an idea of what would happen. And so I would go in the winter and see how winter conditions would go. I'd go in the summer and I would track storms and see how the storms would go. And so I got really good at photographing the Joshua trees in a lot of different conditions. And I kept expanding my area of knowledge, and I still do that today. Even earlier this year, I went off to a new area and went farther down to a place I'd never been before. And I kept expanding. And as I got bored with just hitting the same conditions, I started coming back and looking for rare events. And so I first then started a photograph, and we had a condition where we had a super bloom where all the Joshua trees bloomed together. And so I went and photographed that. And then we also had a time where we had snow. And that was a particularly rare event because we're out in the desert and we don't get a lot of snow. And I reached out to the biologist there in the region, and he said this is the first time in the 7 years he's been out there that he's ever seen snow. Um, and then I got, double rainbows. And so as I kept going to this local area and filling out my repertoire of images, I started realizing I had kind of the largest collection ever of this area of images that were particularly interesting. And so what I ended up actually doing with this is I reached out to a Utah local magazine and I took this idea of the yes and philosophy. I went to a place, visited it over and over again, and then I started getting it in every type of condition. And then I reached out to this Utah Life magazine, and they took the images and they ran with a story about the conditions and this unique niche area here in the state of Utah, and they wrote a story about me and all the images. And because of my going back and revisiting the location over and over and over and over again, I ended up being able to pull together a really kind of nice photo story about the Joshua trees, their life, their death, the things that are out there and everything in between. So like it turned out to be this really amazing experience to be able to do that. And I would have never had that opportunity if I hadn't kept going out to this place over and over and over again. And so, like, this is why local areas matter a lot because they're really, really easy to go and hit. They're really easy to be able to go and try and do things and, experiment, and maybe they fail and maybe they don't. But at the end of the day, if you end up actually building a large enough collection of images from an area, I mean, somebody here that said the nature preserve they liked going to, you could submit that preserve, those images that you created at that nature preserve to a local magazine, and they're always looking for something. And they might pull your photos together, do an interview, and end up actually publishing your images. And I even got lucky, I got the cover of the photo. I wasn't even planning on that. They just reached out to me like a month and a half after I had submitted everything to them. They asked if I had a cover or an image that would work for a cover. And then I got a cover photo, which had never happened before. And so that was a really amazing experience to do that simply because I kept revisiting a location. Now let's talk about further locations. Places that you only visit once or twice a year, but places you go back to regularly. Those are really important, and they're really important to do the yes and philosophy. And so let's go through these questions and ask here. So if people are willing to talk, um, name some of your favorite locations you guys only go to once or twice a year.
Yeah, it's Rich Scar. I go to the coast of Maine, particularly northern Maine, and then also very southern Maine, all in the ocean.
Oh, is that like Cascadia, right?
Yeah,
Cascadia,
up to
Arcade.
Camden, Maine, up north, whatever, and down to York in the south. Yeah, and I've gone there for 5 years now, every summer for about a month, whatever. I never fail to see what you do as well. Same sites every year, whatever, but looking at it different parts when there's storms and kind of things. Interesting.
Yeah, who else has a cool place they like going to once a year? Or, once or twice a year?
We like to go to the Strasburg Railroad, between the photography club and taking grandkids down there, taking pictures of the locomotives. That's always fun. And getting going at different times of the year. Last year we went in February, and there was a couple of us trying to get the steam coming off, the great billows of steam coming off in the cold. So that was cool. I don't, and of course I go to the beach, so I'm a beach person, so I'm always taking pictures of the beach.
Okay. Anyone else have a one they want to throw out there before I move on to the next question? No? Okay, cool. Now, what makes these areas special to you guys for those who have talked? Why do you keep going back to these same locations?
For me again, Rich Scar, the ocean is a staple in nature or whatever, but it's never a staple. It changes every few hours in a lot of different ways, and a lot of things intrude in that, and I think people will come by in different kinds of boats, or there'll be certain kinds of birds that come by, or yeah. So has a variety if you just sit there.
Yeah, I've only photographed the ocean like a couple times because I'm inland, so I almost never see it. So it's definitely one of those like close to once in a lifetime trips for me now, to actually visit oceans. Like it does happen, but it's super rare. So how do you maximize your trips when you guys go out to these locations? You can type these in the comment area too, and I'll bring those up because that's one of those things. Like what method do you guys use when you guys go to these locations that you only visit once or twice a year to make sure you get the best of your conditions?
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I'm photographing a list. I sit long and see nothing until I see a lot of stuff. Make sure to bring all of your gear. Oh man, it's a dangerous thing depending on the person. Time of day, like lots of it. Yeah, I got. I've taken a few people out and about, and every once in a while, I'll see people who bring so much gear that I'm like, oh my gosh, you calm down. Time of day, light quality. Good. So let's get into kind of how I maximize my trips with my idea of the yes and. So locations you visit occasionally should have a yes and philosophy. So what you should do, add one more idea. Mark shots for future use. This is something I do a lot. As I walk around, I will see locations, and it used to be better. I used to, on my phone, used to have the photographer's ephemeris. And as I would walk around with photographer's ephemeris, if I would see something that would look like it would have potential, I'd save it for future reference. And so I would, any time I go anywhere, I would sit there and I would add pins to where I go. The Photo Pills has it, it's just not nearly as good. And then also what I do to try to maximize my experience to really expand my ability to get the most in my hand of photography, I get maps. Here, let me unshare my screen. Let me stop the share here. Can you see me here?
Yes.
Okay. So maps. See if it'll do this. I can get rid of you see my little map here? My National Geographic maps. I buy these wherever I go because these contain a ridiculous amount of useful information. And so if you're planning on doing any trip that has a Nat Geo map, buy it. I'll get back to my presentation here. But this is one of those things that I'm going to talk about, and I'll talk about a little bit more here in a second. But get Nat Geo maps to mark them. So and then use things like photographer's ephemeris and PhotoPills to plan. If you haven't started doing that, I highly recommend it. I know photographer's ephemeris is a little bit more niche, but if you have iPhone, it's a worth your while app to get. In fact, it's my personal favorite. I like it way better than PhotoPills. Um, and so these are really useful ways in order to try to maximize your trips. So let's talk about one in particular that, or one area that matters a lot to me that I keep going back to with my revisit. This is Escalante, which is my desert muse. There are places that I go to regularly, and there's places I try to get to as much as I can, but the reality it's still only once or twice a year. But the place I go is Escalante. And so the idea is I actually have a map for all parts of that. I plan as much as I can. I plan every single trip, but along the way, I would sit here and I would plan a sunrise in a particular area that I've been before, and then I then try to plan someplace I haven't been. And so the idea is when I go to this area, I have one place I always try to get a phenomenal photo, and then one place that I can experiment. And so it's this idea of going out to this desert location for me that I can keep trying and expanding. And so the yes and philosophy has turned out to be really useful here. And it allows me to build a really deep portfolio of this location. And it has caused me to have just this like phenomenal collection of images out of this area. So marking future routes is really important when it comes to places like this, when it comes to like my trips out to Escalante, for example. A lot of times I'll get physical maps, like I was saying, and then I would go on them and I would plan out ideas, and then I would turn to Google Earth, and then I will sit here and mark those out there. And so let's go through an example of how of one of these places that ended up being one of these places where that I would revisit over and over and over again, trying to get the right shot, and then how I used my revisiting philosophy to get the most out of my trips. So these two little hoodoos here, these two hoodoos have evaded me for years. They feel like they have a really good photo opportunity amongst them. But the first time I photographed them in 2017, they looked like this, and I had kind of really boring skies, and I didn't love the photos. And so I went and I tried, and nothing came of it. And so I would come back to Escalante over the next few years, and I would always just revisit these hoodoos just to see if I could do something with them. And so I came back again in 2018. This is try number two. And I went there to try to photograph it at sunset once again. And I got nice, pretty fluffy clouds, but I wanted to get color within the image. And I ended up not. The sunset fell apart and I didn't get any conditions that worked out well. But I was out there for an art show. And so it was easy for me to go out there. And so I went out there, visited it. And then once I got my one shot at it, I photographed other places the rest of the time I was there. And then I would come back and think about it. And so I kept thinking about these hoodoos, and I wasn't in love with the images. Then, it says try number 3, 2025. That's in all reality. I'd actually been back there 2 or 3 other times. I just didn't even photograph it. But in 2025, I went back there and I was more of like a midday shot to kind of give this a shot and see how it worked. Didn't love it. But in the meantime, as I would go to these locations, I kept going back to these hoodoos. I would add one more area that I hadn't been to before, and I would just sit there and I would try these other areas. And so while I sucked at my photographing my two hoodoos, which are these towers here that stand up, I would then go hit something else. And then I would go hit something else. And then I'd go hit something else. And so at the end of the day, I ended up building this huge portfolio, doing this over and over and over again. And then finally, I got my sunrise. Okay. It took it until the fall of 2025, almost a decade of trying to photograph these hoodoos, that I finally got all the conditions and the clouds and everything to align to get these hoodoos with nice color, nice contrast, good, overall light. And I was finally happy with this set of hoodoos. Now, the great thing about doing this, I don't have to photograph these again. I can move on. I'm perfectly content with these images. And so I can now choose someplace else like Devil's Garden, which is this top right image with the Milky Way, I can do more up over there. Or I can go hike the canyons and get more flowers down lower down. And I don't have to put any energy or thought into these hoodoos anymore. So that's my methodology to take the most out of these areas that I only visit once or twice a year. I hit them once and I find a location that I really love that I can't get quite the right conditions. I come back to it, try it. If it works out, cool. If it doesn't, move on to something else. Build out a portfolio of other things that do work out well, but always keep those areas in the back of my mind for when the day comes where the things might work out. The reason why I went to these hoodoos here this morning is once again, I was back out here for an art show and I saw I had partly cloudy conditions and I knew I was going to have clear clouds off to the east. And so I knew I was going to have a good sunrise. And so I kind of combined all these years of experience coming out here, building out this knowledge of the area. And finally, I got this photo. But in the meantime, I got a lot of other things. So now let's talk about once in a lifetime locations. Who has a once in a lifetime location they want to go to? You can do it. Ooh, Japan. What part of Japan? Do you know? I don't know yet. Okay. Anybody else? Who else has a once in a lifetime location that they would like to go to but have not gone yet?
Dubai's on my list.
Dubai. Okay. Architecture or something?
Primarily, yeah, from what I've seen.
Okay. Italy or
Nathan, how about Machu Picchu?
ooh, okay, Machu Picchu. That's a heck of a one. You have to the good lungs. I hear that one's steep. Doing a 13-day trip in Italy. Ah, okay. I just did or this year I did an 8-day trip in Alaska, and it's going to be very similar to this one idea. Okay. Anyone else? Any place else somebody wants to throw out?
I like to go back to the places when I wasn't doing photography over the years, whatever, particularly India.
Oh yeah, I got a handful of those. Yep. So, I have India, we have Italy, Paris, Japan. So there are locations in this world that are hard to get to and that we might never get a chance to go back to. And so I have a couple tips that I want to share with you guys tonight to try to maximize these once in a lifetime locations about pre-planning and getting the best conditions. The realities with once in a lifetime trips, there is just a reality of luck. Sometimes people are lucky and they get phenomenal photos. Other times you're stumped and you get crap. That just happens. So let's talk about how we can try to like maximize our time there. So pre-planning, figure out when sun orientation. This is one that I do a lot. So if you're not familiar, once again, does everyone here use PhotoPills or know about PhotoPills? You can do a little thumbs up or like a response using the chat feature or something, or using the chat. If you have never heard of PhotoPills, say so now. Okay, seems like people know about it. Good. Okay. So PhotoPills or a photographer's ephemeris. So these apps that allow you to plan sun orientation in order to get the best, lighting in area. Other things that I don't think people take in consideration enough is precipitation, rain. So since I do a lot of landscape photography, weather matters. And so when I'm looking at a location, am I going to go there during, max rainy season or dry season? For example, in my location, Zion National Park. Zion National Park, the driest month of the year is June. And so if I'm wanting to come photograph thunderstorms, the time to photograph thunderstorms is not June. I need a plan to come in like August or September. That's the time to photograph thunderstorms in Zion National Park. And so paying attention to things like weather, percentage of cloud cover, you can even do things like that. Temperatures, what type of conditions do you want to do? try to plan these locations as much as you possibly can before you go there can save you a heartache and a half. Because if you, for example, like I went to Hawaii in June and it was a perfect time to go photograph Hawaii. But if I'd been in like December or January, talking to locals there, they said it just rains nonstop. That's rainy season for them. And so if I was there during that time, I would just be hammered with rain and not what I would want. I want sporadic rain, not torrential downpour. And so do a lot of pre-planning, figure out which month is best, which, time of year is best, which season is best, figure out sun orientation, sunrises and sunsets to figure out how to maximize your time. And so let me give an example of a kind of a once in a lifetime area for me. This is called the Maze District. If you're unfamiliar with Utah, Utah has 5 national parks. Of those 5, one of them is called Canyonlands. You guys are all familiar with Canyonlands if you're a photographer, because Mesa Arch is from there. Mesa Arch is the most iconic arch in the world outside of Delicate Arch here in the state of Utah. It's the one where the sun rises and everyone photographs it, and you hear about people going there in the summer, and people are punching each other in the face, and there's fights breaking out, and people are yelling at each other because they're trying to get this shot. Outside of that one area, though, the maze, or not the maze, Canyonland is broken up into 3 distinct districts. You have a top district, which is the most iconic and famous, and then we have one that's called the Maze District and one that's called the Needles District. And the Maze District is the most isolated place within probably the lower 48 and for sure within the state of Utah. So the Maze District had a section of it that never had a human touch it until or not a human, a white person touch it until 1960 something. Okay, the canyon is blocked off and not easily accessible to anything, and so there's a section that's never been grazed by cows before. If you've ever read Edward Abbey, his Desert Solitaire, he eventually goes down into the Maze District, and if I remember correctly, he had to rappel to get back down into it. So this area is really, really remote. And so I got invited by Nick Stover, the guy who runs the Nature Photo Collective, to come join him out here. And so we went out to this location, and I realized that doing this is going to be kind of my once in a lifetime opportunity to ever see this area. It requires extreme 4-wheel drive. It requires, pretty hefty equipment. And when you go out there, they don't let you into the area unless you have an overlanding setup. If they look at your car and it's not good enough, they turn you around and they say, you cannot come here. And so it's really difficult to get to. And so before we went, I knew the locations that we were going to go. And so before, now that I know this area, I'm going to go to these specific spots. And this is where I did my pre-scouting. I know I'm going to be here and I know I'm going to be there. And then when you get to these locations beforehand, you scout the area when you arrive. So, for example, we arrived at the Maze Overlook, which I'll talk about and show you pictures here in a second. And when we got there a few hours early, and I began to plan my photos. This is my second visit. The first visit was from afar. That was using things like Google Maps and everything. My second visit now for this location is sitting here and getting to the area as early as I can, and then begin to walk around and find compositions. And so then I began to plan option 1, option 2, option 3, option 4, and I began to kind of line up different shots that would work better in one condition or another. And I sat there and I pre-planned out 4 or 5 shots for an evening. So what had happened, we got to this Maze Overlook, which is this bottom left image here. And I got there and I planned this shot on the left, and I said, oh, this is really good. And then I walked around and kept finding different orientations, and I liked this perspective on the right, my option number 2. And I sat there and I planned out the whole evening, and then I got to wait. And I sat there for 2 or 3 hours, and then finally conditions arrived. And the very first condition that arrived was this beam of light that hit these towers out here in my option 1. And as that hit, I started paying attention to the cliffs in the distance for this image in option 2. And I started watching those cliffs, and I started seeing the light drop underneath the clouds and begin to light up all the cliffs over there. And so after I feel I got a decent shot for option one, I dropped everything and ran to my option two shot, and I got my option two shot, and I got a really lovely photo for my second option. So once again, I only had really one opportunity to photograph this location. And so in order to maximize that, I planned out shot after shot after shot. I pre-composed. I did everything I possibly could to maximize this one opportunity. I still haven't been back to this area, and it's been like 6 years. I don't know if I'll ever get back to this area with how difficult it is. And so this is one of those areas that because I planned out thoroughly, I ended up getting a couple really awesome shots that I actively sell today. Example number two, we're going back to Canyonlands. And once again, this is with Nick. And we went back to another area called the White Rim Trail. And the White Rim Trail takes permits, it takes big overlanding vehicles, stuff I didn't own. And we got to our campsite in this little area, and sunset sucked. But I knew I had a second opportunity. And so that evening, before anything happened, I spent my time walking around and I kept trying to find compositional ideas. And I spent, 2.5 hours doing this before even things were good. And I found this shot and I made a mark of it. And I found a couple other shots and I made plans. And that was my first visit to these areas. And so when sunrise came, I came back to my option number one, and I got this photo here, which I liked, and it came out looking very well. And then as this one faded, I ran off to my option number two, and I got these big stunning buttes lit up in the sunset or in the sunrise. And then I got another option three, where I got these nice telephoto images of the landscape. And so this was one of those opportunities because I had done a lot of pre-planning and a lot of scouting, everything beforehand, doing it early trips before the time matters. I was able to get really good photos. Um, you know, with this in mind, the third visit is sunrise sunset. I like camping at my locations. I don't know if you guys can camp anymore, if you guys like camping at all, or you can find hotels nearby. I like camping at the places that I'm trying to photograph because it always gives me two chances at something. Because oftentimes one of them isn't good, but the other one is. And so when I go to a once in a while lifetime location, I, pre-plan, figure out weather, time of year. Two, when I get there early, I scout it out, try to visualize as many different compositions as I get. And then three, if I can, I try to camp there. Because if I can camp there, I can get to two shots at it. And so doing this gives you two chances to maximize your time. So I went to Alaska, and this whole trip is a once in a lifetime trip for me. And everything about it is you get one shot at it, and you either get a sunrise or a sunset, and you don't have another option because it's too remote and too hard to get back to again. So, one thing I did know beforehand, we would arrive early to every location. I would generally know the area we were going, but I couldn't actually plan this out effectively. And so every single time I did this, I had to plan effectively. So, and I'll skip this question for right now. We'll get to questions later. So, what I did in order to maximize this trip for me, I would do the following. So the first kind of major area was this place called the Russell Glacier. The Russell Glacier is this megalithic monster that eats mountains for breakfast and lunch and dinner, and it does it for 1,000 years. It is one of these stunning locations that was really hard to get to. In fact, it kicked the crap out of me. By the time I got there, I was just physically destroyed and I could barely walk around. And so I, relaxed, did what I could. But what I did after I got to camp, I did 100-yard loop through the whole area to try to find as many good compositions as I possibly could. One towards the glacier and one away from the glacier. And then I began to plot out areas. I would pin them. I'd figure out which direction the sun would be. And I would sit there and I composed 4 or 5 shots before anything interesting was happening to hopefully give me the best results. And in the end, I got 2 really nice photos. So one was these glacial racetracks where the glaciers come down and they peel the mountain off and they make these they call them moraines where the dirt builds up on the sides of the glaciers. And so I got one really nice shot of that. And then I got a really, really nice shot of these flowers looking over here toward this mountain called Castle Mountain. And if I hadn't have pre-planned both of these shots, this whole sunset was botched. It would have been me scrambling around because these things were so far apart from each other. I would have never seen one and the other at the same time. But because I did plan and I did plan and I plotted and I figured out all the different compositions, I ended up having really, really nice a really nice sunset, and I got a lot of good conditions. And then, since I was there for sunrise, because we camped, I got these two really nice photos of the glacier. This is the Russell Glacier, one on the black and white one with these light beams coming down through the sky, and another one with just the glacier and the mountains all around. And so that's how I really utilized my time out there. Another place that I did this is White Sands National Park, and I heard, oh no, no, somebody else I was talking to earlier today who's going out to White Sands. White Sands National Park, I've only been once. I might be again this year or this next year. We'll see. But for me, it was kind of a once in a lifetime location. And in my first visit, I got out there and I got obliterated by wind. And so we had a huge sandstorm that first day, and I spent that first day essentially, destroyed. And I didn't bring the right goggles, and I didn't have the right equipment, and I struggle. I got a couple nice shots, but because I was going to be there for both a sunrise and a sunset, I was able to get this really nice photo of White Sands with the freshly reset sand due to the wind and these nice yuccas. And so this idea of, pre-plan, scout, and then hit it at a sunrise and a sunset really utilizes and maximizes your time for these once in a lifetime locations that if you don't do that, you're really missing out on good opportunities. So finally, let's talk about revisiting files. So up to this point, it's all been about revisiting locations. But the other half of photography is revisiting images you have taken. And so the greatest mistake I have made as a photographer is not keeping files and not taking enough exposures with the future in mind. This is something that no one talked to me about when I was younger and getting into photography. And so I took a lot of photos and I threw away a lot of images because I didn't think I would be able to fix them. So for example, in 2017, I didn't know about things like exposure blending, focus stacking, but I kind of understood the principles. I didn't know how to do them, but I understood, the ideas around them. And then as time went on, Lightroom has consistently added cool new features. I don't know if anyone's noticed all the cool AI features that Lightroom has added lately. It can do a lot of really stunning things. And so, like when I started photography, subject select didn't exist. Sky select didn't exist. The refine mask options really didn't exist. And generative fill didn't exist. And so, as we go along, there are images that we take that if we don't plan for the future, we might throw away good options. So, for example, how many of you right now, for example, know how to focus stack effectively? You can just type it in the chat right now. How many of you know how to do this? I got one yes. That's how many people? We got 32 people and one yes in Photoshop. Love to do it, but I have no devotion to the time. Not my best skill. Okay. Okay, so I got 5 or 6 yes, one not my best. I'd love to do it. Okay, how about sky replacements or particularly things like luminosity masking or familiar even with that? Okay, I got some yeses. Okay, yes on both. Again, you guys are well educated. That's one of those things that are just learning. Yes, yes. That's one of those things that has become a bigger thing lately, and there's a lot more features now that allow it to do this. But absolutely, when I was starting, it was kind of a really niche thing. And you kind of had to find a professional out there who would walk you through it. Otherwise, there was no like good tutorials. Um, and so when I started my photography, I didn't plan for that in mind. So switch this. So here's an image of my Lightroom catalog of Zion National Park. What do you guys notice about this catalog, particularly the number of images I took between 2014 and 2025?
Yeah. Continually increasing.
Okay, continually increasing. Okay. The real answer to why that happened is not because I took more photos. In 2020 or 2016 and 2017, 2018, what I would do is I would photograph images and then I would choose the ones I liked the most and throw away the rest. And it ended up with the situation where, as I would go back and look through time, I would suddenly realize I remembered photographing something and then I wouldn't have the image for the future. And so this is my bad practice. I would only keep images I liked, and I would do a bunch of different iterations of something, and I would only choose one. Uh, and then I would only run with what I deemed as spectacular, and it was awful. It was terrible. It was the worst thing I could have done for my photography. I had this question, why is this bad? Why do you think this is a terrible thing for me to have done for you out there who are smarter and brighter than I was in 2018?
Mhm.
You can throw in the chat. You lose options to create other photos. Yes. Yes. You lose options. Okay. So, for example, why we go back and actually we'll talk about the bad practice and what I did. So eventually as I went along, I would start working on these concepts that I would go back to and revisit. And I realized I was missing good opportunities. And so what I did eventually, I began to do things like this where I would go back and revisit photos and files when I had more skills in the future. And so after I, had my bad practices, and then I started improving both, photographically and editing wise, I began to sit here and go back and look at images and how I did something from years ago, and then I'd go back and see if I could do it better. And so after I, went through those past images, I would look at them and say, I could do better. I know I can do better. So the image on the left is my first time editing this image in like 2017 or 2018. And the image on the right is something I did uh, last year, maybe even earlier this year. Probably last year. Last year, I got back and I revisited this image of the night shot and I reworked it. And one of the things I realized as I did this, I was much better at color correction. I was much better at bringing out details in the shadows. If you look over here on the left, all these trees are essentially pitch black. And now I was able to pull out to the colors and the detail and everything that was, there within the files. And so one of the things that I really learned from my bad experience, my bad practices, that I lost my options, but what I did have is I still had something. And so over time, I began to go back and revisit images. And as I learned how to exposure blend, I would get better and better quality images where the ground had better detail and the sky wasn't so dark and dramatic and broody that was probably a little overkill. And so as I learned how to exposure blend, I began to go back and revisit images. Now, one of the things I learned in the process of doing this is I often didn't take enough photos, and I'll get to that in a second in order to do this effectively. And then what I would also do, I would come back to these images as I would learn to see if I could get them right. This image was a really hard image for me to photograph. It had a lot of really hard dynamic range. I was getting rained on. It was a very difficult photo. And so trial 1 and 2, I did these. And then image 3 was what I did like 2 years ago. And then finally, I ended up switching to one other image that I had that was vertical that I like overall better. It has a little bit better quality of a more natural feel and less like Mordor. And so because I had these different versions, I was able to go back through and rework them until I got them to what I liked. And so this is where we get to our best practices when it comes to planning for the future for a day when you will have the ability to do some of these tricks and tips and tricks that people always talk about. Um, my best practice is be a stickler when you take the photo. It doesn't always make sense to take like 400 photos, but it does make sense to photograph as much as you can that is good. And then what you need to do is, when you go out to a location, and if you think you have to do some exposure blending and you can't get it all in a single file, do the exposure blend practice in camera anyways. Photograph the underexposure, photograph the overexposure, and hold on to those files for the day when you do know how to do this. And so what I would recommend, for example, if you're photographing a situation which requires you to do some focus or some exposure blending, what I would recommend, what you should do is um, do a bracketed shot, either even 3 to 5 images, and keep all 5 of them just in case. And then what you do when you start practicing and getting better at that, and if you love the photo, you have all these additional files to work with, and then you can actually pull them together in the future. That's something I have photos I find in the past that I didn't do that. I didn't do enough exposures to pull them together effectively, and I kept running to this situation where I don't have it. So now, for example, when you go back and look at my Zion catalog and why there's 2,148 images for 2024 for Zion National Park. It's not because I took 2,148 great images of Zion National Park. I have hundreds of exposure brackets for images there that if the day comes in the future, I can come back and edit those images, or if I need them, I have them as an option. And then finally, for the focus stack, even if you don't know how to focus stack effectively, just practice it and have those files for the day when you can do it well. And so this is one of those things where it really does make a difference. We all have a lot of years ahead of us. We all have a lot of time to sit here and practice and work on things. And if you shortchange yourself by not collecting that information now, you're going to ruin photo opportunities in the future. For example, if I hadn't, done enough, wise photo data collection for my Joshua Tree images, I would have never had enough images to pull together for a magazine article. I just wouldn't have had it. Or when I look at, I have a Zion photography guide. If I hadn't have done enough, image collection over the years, I wouldn't have enough information to pull together a full guide. And so that's one of those things that we should for sure focus on when it comes to our photography. So a recap of everything. Local haunts, revisit. That's a place where you sit there and you build your skills. Further locations, utilize the yes and technique. Revisit a location until you're satisfied with that photo and expand to someplace else and slowly build a repertoire of photos that encompasses an entire region that you can then utilize for your own doing. And then for our once in a lifetime locations, plan before you go, get to the area's location, those areas early, pre-plan your shots, and then finally, camp and utilize your sunrise and sunset, and utilize the reality that you only have this one shot. Take advantage of it. And then finally, for the recap, keep your files. One of the most important things you can do is keep your files, because if you don't, you're going to be like me and hate the fact that you have some really great photos from 2017, 2018 that you can't use because you messed up, because you didn't keep enough information instead of, keeping too much. It's really hard to keep too much. It's really easy to not keep enough. Okay, let's go with questions. Any questions you have for me? And they can be about the topic or they can be about the Southwest or anything you guys like. It's about an hour presentation. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Yeah, I can start things out. Being a family man, how do you balance family responsibilities with shooting?
Oh, balancing family responsibilities with shooting. Um, There is some tension. Sometimes I definitely push the limits. A lot of the times, my most free time is sunrise, and I go out to one of my local areas beforehand. Other things I do, I combine a lot of trips. So I do art shows. And so when I go to a place, like I do a Moab art show. And so I drive out to Moab and I'm there for 2 or 3 days selling photos. But at sunrise, I'm taking photos. At sunset, I'm taking photos. And so then I burn that candle on both ends as far as I possibly can to get as much as I out of every single trip. Um, I bring my family to a lot of locations. And so, depending on the image that you guys saw tonight, there is a solid chance there was a 3-year-old hanging out next to me for those images. Right now, I've been particularly swamped. So I haven't got out nearly as much. Uh, but I really try to utilize those sunrises and sunsets. Just go out for an evening, come back.
And Nathan, I have a question. Are you bringing a lot of camera equipment, lens, tripods, or are you
Uh-huh.
keeping it kind of light?
I will show you my entire setup. I have.
Anybody have a
I
joke?
do everything with one wide angle and one telephoto.
Where's your tripod?
And I have a tripod. Let's show everything. For my tripod, I use a Faisal and a Really Right Stuff ball head. I occasionally do stuff with a 100 to 500, and I occasionally play around with the macro lens, but my entire existence is 2 lenses.
Wow.
Terrific. Thank you.
So I'm a firm believer that uh, you don't need a huge collection of gear in order to do stuff. Every once in a while, I run into limitations, but more often than not, the limitations force you to have to be creative. And so, and then other things that I do notice with people when I've gone out and photographed with other people, when they have too many options, they keep bouncing between 2 or 3 or 4 different lenses and they miss opportunities. So I really try to stick to like the single camera going. I kind of wish I would have a second body for doing stuff, but more often than not, I just keep it simple. I got what's your wide angle focal length? I have a 14 to 35 f4 Canon for the R, for the R series.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so I do own a f2.8 for astrophotography. And so that I have a Tamron lens for that. That's really good for that. I might one day sell both my 14 to 35 and my Tamron and just get the 15 to 35 f2.8 and just call it a day and just keep one lens instead of having a couple floating around. But the f2.8, that Tamron lens was my workhorse lens for years. It's a great lens, and the only reason why I don't use it anymore is because it's so heavy, and I did too much hiking, and I needed some way to cut down on weight.
Nathan, I think what you do is I was thinking about this is a great example of self-therapy. To stay in one spot and look at the same scene for many of us, whatever, it requires a high toleration for ambiguity of what are you doing there. Voices start entering your head of like, what am I going to do with this picture? Or why am I taking a picture of a tree? And you really have to stay both focused, I think, on what you're trying to do. At the same time, is just sit there. Just sit there and absorb. Just know that you're going to be there for hours to do it, whatever, which is really hard and tedious. But out of that comes something or nothing that time, whatever. But if you go with the angle that somehow you really are going to get great shots, you keep repeating it. That's great. Bravo to those people. But for me, I hear all the voices in my head that say, "Why am I here?"
The way I try to get around that is getting to a location an hour and a half early. So an hour and a half gives you enough time to find something, but it's not too long that you get too bored. And so the hour and a half window is a nice little chunk because the first 30 minutes is you trying to find something, and then most people can at least wait an hour. And if you can wait that 1 hour, usually by 30 minutes before sunrise or 30 minutes before sunset, things begin to happen. Now, what I am bad at is sitting at the bottom of a canyon, for example, and just waiting for the light to slowly crawl into place. That's one I am bad at. I don't know if you guys have ever seen Ben Horn. He's a photographer based in California who does large format photography. And he comes out to Zion National Park once a year and he'll just like find a tree. And he's like, the light's not good yet. I'll hang out here for 5 hours. I don't do that very well, but I will hang out for 2 hours.
Can you name any other photographers that you admire and follow?
Um, and admiring photographers. Let me put them. I'll put them in the chat as I think of them.
Or somebody that's
So Guy
mentored you?
Tao, I've talked to him a little. He's one. Nick Stover, he's the guy I work with.
Mhm.
He doesn't share as much of his images, but the few that I have seen are really quite enjoyable. You can go through his website. His website doesn't is not up to date at all. He's just sitting on a backlog of like 10,000 images. Um, what's his name? Eric Bennett, ETTE Bennett. I like him. He's another Utah-based photographer who does a lot of really nice work. Um, you have Thomas Heaton there in the UK. Murray Livingston. I spelled his name wrong, Murey. Murray Livingston. I'm going to be beginning to run photography workshops with him. He's based out of the UK, and so he's going to come with me to Death Valley here in February this next year, if we get enough people signed up. And so those are a few photographers, some local, some farther away. What's his name? He's my local photographer. There's a guy right up the road from you. He runs a gallery here in Springdale. His name's skipping my mind. You put me on the spot.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good.
I understand you also have a presentation or some resources about your work in selling your photographs at festivals, art festivals.
Yeah, I do that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, is there some place that people could see that or
No, that's like a presentation I do to like people here. I've thought
Okay.
about writing it. There are bits and pieces you can get around online.
Mhm.
But this would be like from my perspective over the years of doing it. Things that I have seen, advice I give to other photographers and other artists when I meet them at art shows. Things that, make a world of difference. Like, the most important lesson I can give to any photographer, like I can give you two most important lessons. You don't sell the size you don't have, and your presentation, your display is half your sales. And so those are two bits of information that if you're ever planning on selling photos, that, if you think you're going to show up to a show and have a bunch of 8x12s or 8x10s and you're going to sell 20x30s, you just probably won't.
Okay. Oh, was that the topic of your discussion with Matt Payne in his
I did,
podcast?
yeah. I talked about some of it there. Yep.
Yeah. That's and what's the name of his podcast?
F-stop, collaborate, and listen.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good one to follow, guys. He interviews lots of different photographers and very interesting stories.
Yep.
Yeah,
Any other questions?
yeah, let's get some other questions from some other members. While they're thinking, let me tell you that while you were mentioning going back and visiting old photos, I thought of another reason. You mentioned the software gets better and your skills get better. And what I
Mhm.
recently discovered, I really like to blend images in Photoshop,
Oh, okay.
not just do composites, but blend them together in different ways. And that's kind of a recently discovered interest of mine. And I found out by going back and looking at pictures from past trips that I didn't actually flag in Lightroom Classic as ones as keepers, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't discard them. I'm finding a new use for them in these blending techniques. So I,
Yeah.
I agree with you. Don't just randomly or don't just haphazardly discard photos that you haven't flagged as keepers.
Yeah, I kick myself so much. I was trying to put together like an ebook for Zion National Park of like 10 years of photographing the park. And I would get to this situation, I would go through, and I'm like, I know I photographed that area.
Yeah.
Where's my images? And I would have one instead of like six. And I was like, ah, dang you, Nathan.
Yeah. Guys, other questions, comments? Okay. Okay, we'll give you another shot here. If not, we're going to wrap things up.
They're very, very helpful, Nathan. Really, really something.
Okay, Nathan, yes, we appreciate your time and your expertise there and sharing your photos and information. So thank you very much. And I'll put information in the follow-up email tomorrow about how you can follow Nathan and his bio, his website, more about him. So
Yep.
thank you, Nathan. Nathan, guys, if you want to do our usual thing, if you unmute yourself, what we like to do is give you a round of applause.
Hey, thank you. And here's
Thank you.
my contact information. If you guys want to get a hold of me, here's my website, standrephotography.com, or you can email me. I would love if you guys want to join my mailing list. I send out an email once a month. I try not to be annoying about it. It'll usually come with like a new image and photo stories and stuff like that. So if you guys want to stay in touch with a Western photographer, I'm out here. And then once again, if you guys want to join me for photography workshops, I'm with the Nature Photo Collective, run by Nick Stover. And I'm the guy who plans everything. So I'm the one who puts together the permits. I'm the one who figures out locations to go. So if you guys want to come join us, for a fun rip roaring adventure, I would love
What
for you guys to come join
what
me.
are they typically? Are they week-long trips?
I'm shooting for about 4 to 5 days right now. Once again, I have kids, and so I can't do like 10 days all the time.
Mhm.
And so I'm sticking for about 3 to 4 days. And so generally speaking, what we have kind of going on, we have ones like an overlanding, so we have big Jeeps set up to camp out of and run around and play around in the desert. And then the other ones are like hotels. And then I have a really cool one. Since my printer that I use is like here in St. George, and I can drive to his office and I can see my prints come off the printer. And so I have a really cool one coming up in November of next year to go photograph Zion National Park in the fall. And then what I really wanted to do something different with that one is to then edit a photo from that trip and then walk over to the print office, the actual print shop, and then see your print come to life, have it come out of the printer, laid on the metal, and then turned your photo into a metal print, and then you get to walk away with a metal print. And so that's kind of a cool one that I put together for next fall. And I talked to the printer. It's really cool. If you've never had a chance to actually see how a metal print comes to life, it's kind of like watching magic happen.
Mhm.
Um, and so that was one that I was really kind of excited for that I got the green light to do. So
Right after the pandemic, my wife and I went on a 30-day car trip and we spent some time in Utah. It was
mhm.
much, much too short, but I was thoroughly impressed. I love Utah. It's just beautiful.
Hmm.
Certainly want to come back and, it would be nice to take advantage of your workshop opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Come on. I'll say hi. I'll take you to all the cool places that no one talks about because I've been everywhere. One of the weird things about being a Division of Wildlife employee is that you kind of have to go wander around every nook and cranny of the state of Utah, and you're like, you see that random stream over there? You have to figure out how to get into it. And so you end up just going everywhere.
Oh, so you're still working actively as a biologist?
As a professor, I teach.
Okay.
So I teach biology, but I wish I was still working as a biologist. Just life happened and it hasn't worked out. So things.
Okay. How about talking just briefly about your transition as a full-time photographer? Was that an easy transition? You're making money hand over foot now
Oh,
and
am I making
independently
money
wealthy?
in this? No. How the transition? So, like I said, I've been selling photos for about 8 to 10 years, um, and it was always a side thing. And the photography business has always been like vacation money. And so as I worked for the state and did other things and picked up my schooling, it was always like this, like, hey, I have a few $100, we can go anywhere type of thing in the area with a minivan and let's go do that. And so that's what it primarily was doing. And then I went off to go to grad school, graduated. I graduated into the pandemic, not a great time to graduate, and couldn't find a job for a long time and was still doing the photography thing. And my wife was working, but we wanted to have that one last kid. And so I started working at the university, and so I had that going for me. And then, which I only worked part time, and then she wanted to stay home with the kid because this is our last one, and so I jumped in, full steam. I'm running the photography business full time now, and it has its ups and downs. This fall has been rough just because of timing and everything, but it's really exciting to go to a show and walk out and made a ton of money, but it's also really stressful to go to a show and not. And so uh, I'm always thinking about 2 weeks ahead or 3 weeks ahead at minimum. And so that's one of the hard things about it. But at the same time, like doing art shows is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, having somebody walk away with a print and have somebody who looks at your stuff and says, I value that at $4,000 or something. And then they drop a huge amount of money on a photo, and you're like, wow, that's really impressive that somebody does that. And so that's one of those things that there's nothing quite like that. And so that's one of the things that keeps me going. But you definitely have crap days where you're sitting there and nothing's happening. You're like, why am I wasting my time doing this? But you never know. Every single show is kind of like a lottery where you'll do a show that is like, I made $25 and at the very end I got a phone number and that phone number turned into a 40 by 60-inch print. So
I think Mike Donovan says the same thing. He does shows. You want to comment on that, Mike, if you're still with us?
It's a total crapshoot.
Yeah, I had a motorhome for many years, and at one point, I envisioned that when I retired, my wife and I would travel full time in the motorhome, and I would just photograph. Well, like you say, life doesn't always work out. Things are still good. Okay, guys, any final questions?
Great presentation, Nathan.
thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Definitely want to get to Utah.
Yeah, I need to get back east. Something I've never had a chance to do.
Okay, Nathan, thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Okay,
We
thank you.
appreciate your time and your expertise. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending, guys. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Right.